Chapter 13, our last chapter of the semester, and folks, the semester is close to over. All right. Starts off talking about the Byzantine Empire. Essentially, the Byzantine comes to the word Byzantium, which was what this area was called before Constantine put his capital there. This is right located between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. So it's a very valuable place, and it's like a stepping stone between Asia and Europe. So that's why the Muslims had wanted it for a long time. They needed this area to step into Europe, and Constantinople was the big city that stood in their way. Constantinople was the capital. The Byzantine Empire, one of the things you think about is their artwork, which was always very religious in nature. And they tended to like the stained glass or the mosaic. Now, when I was in elementary school, our teacher required that we use some of the colored paper the school provided and cut it up into mosaics. And I made a mosaic of a knight in armor. I still recall it. The mosaic has long disappeared from my personal belongings, but I drew a mosaic. My daughters made up mosaics when they were growing up in our homeschool. But anyway, the Byzantine people were great at mosaics, stained glass. The Byzantine Empire, it was what was left of the Roman Empire. When the Roman Empire died, the Byzantine Empire took its place. The first emperor of note is Justinian. Justinian conquered a vast amount of territory. Your book shows a picture of he conquered all of Italy, all of what is today Switzerland, and all the region of the Adriatic Sea, and conquered all this here. A great amount of territory, and he almost restored the boundaries of the old Roman Empire. Actually, he did not get France, Spain, and Britain, but he got a lot of territory, but he overextended himself. And even before he died, revolts started, rebellions started, which he could not quell. And 3 years after he died, all of his conquests were lost, and the empire was practically bankrupt. But he started out, and it looked like the empire was on its way to greatness. Now, Justinian is remembered for two things. Number one is his law code. I've already mentioned how that King Henry I told the judges, use the law of Justinian if you're trying a case, and then if you can't find anything to cover the case there, make up your law. And the nobility said, hey, this gives too much power to the judges, so the judges were reined in. But Justinian's law code was used throughout the Middle Ages all over Europe. Again, the Romans were great at their practice of law. He codified Roman law as had not been done probably since the days of Julius Caesar. He's also remembered for his wife he married, Empress Theodora. Theodora was a young woman who was born in poverty, and it was very rare in those days that emperors married commoners. Theodora started out as a prostitute and apparently made a fairly good living from that profession. And then from there, Theodora saw her and he liked her and he married her. And she became the queen. And she's remembered for her charitable deeds and good works and her kindness. And one of her good deeds was setting up a home where prostitutes could go and escape that lifestyle if they wanted. Again, she never forgot that she had once been that herself. Now, Justinian also started a vast building program to greatly improve the city of Constantinople. And folks, I think in part that may have been one of the reasons why the place went bankrupt pretty fast. If you're making $1 million a day, but you're spending $1,010,000 a day, you're going to soon go bankrupt. It's just basic fundamental mathematics. Justinian was guilty of spending more money than he was taking in, assuming he'd soon take in more. But one of the things he built was the big cathedral at Hagia Sophia. It was neither a Gothic cathedral nor was it a Romanesque cathedral. It was something different. Your book shows a picture of it. It actually had several different roofs, dome-like roofs that were not barrel-shaped, but a bunch of roofs. And it was a super magnificent structure that took years and years to build. It is still standing, but when the Muslims took over, they converted it into a mosque, and it has remained a mosque to this day. But it was built by Justinian in the early 500s. Well, the palace was the most magnificent palace that could be found possibly in the world up to that time. And again, folk, I've read 2 or 3 articles on how to become a millionaire. And the best way is to live in a modest home, drive a modest car, save your money. When you go on vacation, stay at Motel 6s or cheap motels. Not really, maybe not dirty ones, but just cheap ones. If you do this, you might be able to accumulate wealth. Of course, another thing, don't smoke. That takes a lot of your income away. And don't use tobacco and film. Folks, I mean, I'm serious. This is a way that a lot of 2/3 of your millionaires in this country live this way. Live in modest houses. The surest, quickest way to poverty is a super fine home. An expensive home. Just ask Evander Holyfield, among others. The man I understand is bankrupt today. 20 years ago, he was the highest paid athlete in the country. That was actually that was about 24 years ago. From the year my daughter was born, 1990, he was the highest paid athlete in the country. Today, he's broke. Some of you may have heard, hey, not knocking a man, some of you might have heard this from other sources. I mean, my wife used to live down there where he lived before she was married to me. And I passed by somewhere every time I went to see her parents, and it was a mansion, all right. And when it come Christmas time, it was very, very well lit, super decorated. Today, that's all gone. He doesn't live there anymore, and all the Christmas decorations are gone. But anyway, that's a surefire way to bankruptcy. Anyway, Justinian almost bankrupted the empire. When he died, within 3 years, all that he conquered was done away with. But the empire, the history book I had when I was in school said the empire had the good fortune of losing its land in Egypt and Syria early on, or its North African territory, because had they held on to these, they'd have been weakened for sure. As it was, the empire experienced periods of up and down. Now, the Eastern Byzantine Empire lasted 1,000 years. It started when Constantine moved in 312, and it was destroyed in 1453. That's more than 1,000 years. Anyway, it went through periods of up and down, but initially it had to start off finishing the wars that had been going on with Persia. These wars had gone on for centuries, and finally the Byzantine people really got serious about dealing with them. And in a series of 3 campaigns, they soundly defeated the Persians. However, it had a bad effect. It weakened both the Persian and the Byzantine Empire and paved the way for the Arabs to come pouring out of Arabia. And they quickly conquered Persia, quickly conquered Syria, and quickly conquered Egypt, and soon conquered North Africa and Spain and Sicily, and began moving in on the Byzantine territory, but they were stopped. The Byzantines had a weapon. Your book tries to describe it. The weapon is called Greek fire. Your book says the Greek fire consists possibly of oil and tar and sulfur. The fact is, I'm not sure if we know the formula to this day. Maybe someone does, but if so, it's kept secret. But they learned how to put this fire in a tube and blow the fire toward an enemy ship. And yes, your book does state what I've told you before. The Greek fire would even burn after it was underwater. So you try to douse the flames with water, and all this would do was spread the flames wider. And folk, there are some fires that are like that. I mean, oil fires. You see an oil fire in your kitchen, you try to put water on it, the fire will just spread all over the place. Use a fire extinguisher. Anyway, I don't know if fire extinguisher would work with Greek fire or not, but the Greek fire would even burn in the water. And it was said that about 100 ships tried to invade the Byzantine Empire. Maybe 1 or 2 returned, and they were the ones who got out of there the quickest, took off running. The Greek fire destroyed it. Once the Greek fire touched the ship was going down, and nothing could be done to save it. It was, like I say, they noticed the ship would still be burning as it went under, burning perhaps along part way to the bottom. But of Greek fire saved the Byzantine Empire for several generations. The Byzantine Empire went up and down. The Muslim world went up and down. Now, your book goes on to tell how that the Byzantines began to separate themselves from the Roman Church. Now, there was a problem. The Roman Catholic Church, the Pope, said, I'm the head of all of Christendom. Every Christian owes his loyalty to me. Well, the Patriarch of Constantinople and the Patriarch of Jerusalem and the Patriarch of Antioch and the Patriarch of Alexander said, no, you're just one of us. You're not the head of us. You're just one of us. Because Constantine did not make you the head, and it's true. When Constantine set up the 5 patriarchs, he didn't give one hint that they were subject to the one in Rome. But the one in Rome insisted he be the head, and this got so sharply divided that the 2 churches split. For a while they were split, then after a couple generations they were united again, but finally in the year 1054 they split entirely, and have remained split to this day. The Byzantine Church is sometimes called the Orthodox. They're sometimes called the Greek Orthodox. They have some differences with the Roman Church, and one of the big differences, of course, the number one is they don't accept the primacy or the top authority of the Pope. The other difference, another main difference, is they don't require their clergy to remain celibate. Now, they do have a rule about it. They tell the clergyman, anyone who wants to be a clergyman, if you decide you're going to be a celibate clergyman, you must remain celibate. Or if you wish, you can decide right now to be a married clergyman, and then you can marry, or if you are married already, you can remain married. But they do not require that their clergy be celibate. The Roman Church to this day has insisted that all their clergy be and remain all their lives celibate. And anyway, that's another issue. There are some other issues also. But the main difference, folks, is not their doctrine. The worst thing you can say about the Eastern Orthodox Church was something that maybe they couldn't help. They became a tool of the state. The emperor appointed all the top church officials, and he could fire them anytime he wanted to. The emperor appointed, and then the local magistrates appointed the lower church officials. So the official knew, hey, I got my job because the local sheriff here, the local count appointed me, and the local count can fire me anytime. This was not the case in Europe. Now, it was for a while. There were times in Europe when local magistrates appointed church officials, but the Europeans got together and they solved that problem and said, no, the church appoints its own officials. But this was one difference. So what this meant was the church was very, very weak, at least its ability to speak out. And everywhere that the Greek Orthodox Church has been, everywhere, either the Muslims have taken over or the communists. And I think I mentioned this class how that during the 70 years the communists ruled Russia, the premiers would appoint the patriarchs. At least Lenin appointed a patriarch, if you can imagine that. And the church never officially protested one act by the communist government. Did not serve as the conscience of the nation, did not stand up. See, back in the days of Peter the Great, when Peter ruled Russia, Peter committed adultery, and the patriarch chided him for his adultery, and the patriarch said, "Fear," and he removed the patriarch and appointed his own. And from that time on, the patriarchs of Moscow did not stand up to the Tsar, and that continued when the premiers took over under communism. In contrast, the Pope could stand up to any king in Europe, and for the most part get by with it. Now, we're going to learn later there were some exceptions when a Pope stood up to the king, and I really believe in this case the Pope was on the wrong side of the issue, and the king put the Pope in his place. It did happen in Europe. But in Europe, when the smoke cleared, church and state were separate. Here, in this part of the world, church and state remained together.